Hey, Aaron.
Hey, how's it going, Nathan?
Thank you so much for helping my project.
Of course.
Could you say a few words about yourself?
My name's Aaron. I'm originally from California. Currently working my dream job here at NASA, learning how to fly spaceships.
And this is not your first job.
This is not my first job, that's true.
What did you do before that?
So my first degree was in political economy, and I worked right out of school in renewable energy policy, working to essentially enable more energy storage on the grid. And then after about 3 years of that, I left and I got into criminal justice reform work, and I was doing nonprofit management and project development, basically in the criminal justice reform space. Helped start an organization called Impact Justice out in Oakland, California.
Is this like making sure that defendants get adequate representation and that jury selection and that type of thing? Or?
So we did a lot of different stuff. System change was sort of the broad scope of what we did. So we didn't provide legal representation. We weren't working to improve legal representation necessarily. We were looking at reducing the number of people going into the criminal justice system, improving conditions for people who are already in the system, and then for people who came out, which is most of them, making sure that they have opportunities to rejoin society, become productive members of society. And so we had projects that spanned all of that. We were a national organization. I say we, I still associate myself with them, I guess, still.
Sure.
And they're still doing really good work. So to give two examples sort of at extremes, we had what is called the Restorative Justice Project, which is aimed at building a new process of criminal justice where, the origin of it is actually the Maori in New Zealand. This is what they use as one of their core pieces of their criminal justice system, which is basically, instead of going in front of a jury and a judge, you have a mediated conversation essentially between the person who's committed the harm and the people who had the harm committed to them. Mm-hmm. And through that conversation, you try to identify what can be done to restore the harm that's been done. Sometimes it might be punishment, sometimes it might be payment, sometimes it might just be an apology, but it's really about sort of victim focused, I guess you might say, about what does the person who's had the harm done need to feel whole again, or to at least have some restitution. And so our project at Impact Justice was focused on trying to implement a restorative justice process for juveniles, for youth who committed crime. So really anywhere from the age of 16 to 25 who had committed, including violent crimes in some cases. And the idea was before they even go into with pre-booking or anything like that, if they're eligible, they would get put into this restorative justice process and go through that process. And if they complete the process, that they would come out the other side without ever entering the criminal justice system at all.
Okay.
So that was one project. And then sort of on the other extreme of things, and that was what we would consider new system change or new system development, completely changing the processes of criminal justice. On the other end of the spectrum, we would work with the system to improve it essentially, and for that an example is we housed the Prison Rape Elimination Act Resource Center. So the PREA is a national law that Prison Rape Elimination Act was signed by George W. Bush, and it established at first a commission and then a resource center to set the standards for the law and train the auditors that go into prisons to be in compliance with the law. And so that was a project at Impact Justice. We got funding from the federal government to operate that group and essentially, set the standards for that law and make sure that to try to reduce sexual violence in America's prisons. So that was very much working hand in glove with the federal government to improve the system that exists today, as opposed to completely change it or create a new thing. So we did a lot of different stuff. I think the thing I'm probably most proud of working or being a part of with that, and I was just a little part of it, was it's called the Homecoming Project. And it's actually been kind of blowing up. It's been doing a lot. They've expanded into LA, but the idea is the origin of it was this pithy sort of idea of Airbnb for felons.
Okay.
So people coming out of prison often struggle to find housing, adequate housing. There's halfway houses, we would call them, things like that, where it's sort of institutional still, and there's still often restrictions in a lot of ways that prevent people from really actually getting a job, having a life, being with their families. And so the goal was to have people come out of prison and really put them back in the community and embed them in the place where they will hopefully thrive. And then there's a lot of research that shows that if someone has adequate housing within the first 6 months of coming out of prison, they're much more likely to get a job, to be more productive, and to stay out of prison. And so the project itself was structured in such a way where we would identify somebody coming out of prison who needed a place to live. We would pair them with a person in the community, a homeowner who has an extra room in their house that was willing to rent it. And the project would pay for the first 6 months of rent for that person to live there, in addition to providing them with a bunch of entry goods, like basically a backpack full of stuff that they need to get started, and then connections to services to get their IDs and job prospects, healthcare, all the stuff that they need to really get back into the community and start to grow. And so, yeah, it's been very successful. I think they've passed 100 participants so far, and it's doing really well. So anyway, that's my soapbox.
You sound really passionate about it.
I am. It is that's why I got into it. Is I kind of was looking around for something else to do because I realized that I liked renewable energy stuff, but it wasn't really my field. Mm-hmm. I reached a point where I needed to get a little bit more of a technical degree to go any farther. So I kind of stepped back and I was like, what's the biggest human rights issue I can think of in America that I want to work on? I have a policy degree, so let's go do some policy stuff, right? So criminal justice seemed like the root of it. I felt really privileged to be able to contribute to that world for when I did.
What made you leave that?
I hit a point where I realized I was supporting a lot of really good work that I cared about and was passionate about, but I wasn't ever really going to be the criminal justice expert. And so I didn't have a degree, I'm not directly impacted, I'm not the person that needs to be leading this work. And so I was supporting it, but it wasn't my work. And so I realized I needed to go find what my work was.
And what led you to this?
Well, that decision of what's my work, I'd always been passionate about spaceflight, and since when I was a little kid. And I had multiple people in my life telling me, Aaron, why are you not an engineer? You talk about this stuff all the time. I had the ISS app on my phone. I was watching it go over, and so it was just the obvious choice to go, get an engineering degree was the first step. And then I was just I want to work in human spaceflight or get as close to human spaceflight as I possibly can. I feel so lucky that I got as close as I have. This is such an amazing job. Yeah.
Well, when did you find out that NASA is planning to send astronauts back to the moon?
When did I find out that they were going to send astronauts?
When did that enter your awareness that you're last time was 1972, we're actually going back and it's for real?
I don't know when I actually got the announcement that there was yes, we're doing this. But I kind of just always assumed we would. It seemed like the obvious thing. So I don't know. It's hard for me to actually put a time on, when I heard about Artemis and I was like, oh crap, we're doing this, right? If I had to put a date on it, it'd be somewhere probably in the late 2019-ish, something like that, 2018, 2019. And it's also okay, the SpaceX growth of when the Falcon 9 was really becoming a successful vehicle and all that stuff. I was okay, whether or not we go back to the moon as a nation or SpaceX does as a company or whatever, someone's going to go back there at some point, and I kind of want to be part of it if I can. So yeah.
When you talk to people about the work you do and about us going to the moon in particular, are there particular reasons and aspects of that you find best connect with the people you talk to?
That's an interesting question. Like, are you asking what reasons to go to the moon? Do I think connect the most, like resonate
With
the most with
that you
people?
talk to.
Yeah, it's easier to think of the ones that don't resonate, right?
Sure. Okay, well, what are those? Which ones are kind of like duds? And you're
Like because we can,
Okay.
I think there's a lot of this like, oh,
That
why are we going there when we don't
choose
even know?
to go to the moon because
right.
it's there.
Yeah, because it's hard. It's like, well, people climb mountains. Like, I think they're crazy too. Like, whatever, you know. I think when people start to learn about the science and technology that we get out of the space flight endeavors that we've had so far, I think most people who just aren't in the world or haven't thought a lot about it don't really understand how much science and technology, not just in like GPS or like spacey things that we think about, but in like biology and physics and chemistry and all this stuff that we get from space flight that we wouldn't understand, we wouldn't be able to do if we didn't have an orbital laboratory doing that work. I think that's when people start to sort of change their tune a little bit. They just think of spaceflight as a sort of we're just sending people up there just to see if we can. And it's like, well, we're pushing the boundaries of our understanding of the universe, right? And what humans are capable of. It's not just for fun, you know. That's one that I think that unfortunately it's a hard thing to convey because you can have a bunch of technologies just list off. Oh, we didn't have this, we wouldn't have that, but it's like. It can be hard sometimes to communicate that clearly, as I am right now, obviously.
I mean, it's a difficult thing, you know, we talk about research, but then you're like, okay, so tell me, what's your top 5? And you're like,
Yeah, right.
You know, it'd be
like,
nice to have a top 5. It's like, there's probably thousands of experiments, but none of them really raise to the level of being like transformational.
Right.
Maybe taking it as a collective whole, it's really advances our understanding, but it's a lot harder to articulate than saying, you know, we discovered this one thing that changed everything.
Right. Yeah.
Like
totally.
Semiconductors or
Yeah.
plastics.
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, and those come around, but they don't come around that often necessarily. I think one like tidbit that I try to give people that I think has resonated well is the viral research that's been done. Like crystals form more purely in a zero gravity environment or a microgravity environment, and so you think, oh, whatever, crystals, but it's like that's what like DNA and like viruses and like all these like biological things. So like we're doing viral research and discovering new cures to diseases that we literally could not manufacture them on Earth. They would not work physically on Earth, and like the possibility there is really exciting, I think. And like, sure, right now it's a tiny, you know, at best a refrigerator-sized experiment on ISS, but like when you really start to throw up a bunch more research modules and or manufacturing equipment up there, it changes the game. You know, you can start to print organs, right?
Sure.
And like develop new cures to diseases in all sorts of different ways, and honestly develop new materials that we can't even really understand. Like, I think the thing that's hard to even comprehend yourself is like it's like when we invented the microscope, we started to discover things that we never even thought to look for. Because and same with the telescope, when you look farther, when you go farther, you open up new things that you never imagined. And so I think to me, what I love about space is that it's this environment that we are just barely scratching the surface of like what's even possible. We haven't even, our imagination isn't big enough yet to like really understand what we can find when we start to look. So
Yeah, I mean, that's probably the most exciting thing about us pushing forward is
yeah,
you know, learning the things that we can't even imagine. I mean, like before electromagnetism was like discovered, you know, it's completely invisible to us.
Right.
And now it's like
it's a good
the
example.
foundation of society or gravity waves.
Right.
You know? It's
Yeah.
like-
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
When you think about the future of humanity, if you were to look out like 200 years, especially in terms of, you know, are we still only on the Earth, maybe still short trips to places versus truly branching out into the rest of the solar system, kind of where do you think we get to in 200 years?
200 years?
Yeah.
See, this is a dangerous question for me because my policy degree makes me pessimistic about our prospects of accomplishing much in the world.
Sure.
But I mean, I think it comes down to how much we value exploration, and that, like, fortunately or unfortunately, can be a monetary value, or it could be a societal value or a social value. But like, just like anything, if we put resources into it, we'll go farther than if we don't. And so, at our current pace, if we have a solid moon base that, like, you know, like an Antarctica style moon base, where you have, like, the people who go there are essentially tradespeople to maintain it and scientists to do research. It's not, well, actually, no, I guess there's more of a general public. It's starting to be more of a touristy thing, a little bit, barely, the last, like, maybe decade.
Sure.
I would expect in 200 years we'd have something like that on the moon. Whether we have something like that on, like, Europa or Titan, I don't know. Like, but, you know, a big space station, like space tourism, like a hotel in space that you can go to for, 3 days for $10,000 or something like that, like, you know, the modern equivalent. I think that's reasonable. I don't think we're going to be, I would be surprised if we're, like, you know, we have probes that are remanufacturing themselves out in the, you know, asteroid belts and, like, really doing all that. But I mean, that's the monetary side of it, is like, at a certain point, the economics of it flips, right? And obviously, one part of it is, like, having, in our current, like, capitalistic paradigm, the economics flips of, you have enough resources in space, it's cheap enough to get resources out in space to get those resources back that it makes it profitable to do that.
Or to use them in space.
Or to use them in space, right.
I mean, instead of, like, transporting stuff from Earth to space and back,
right,
you're actually just using the space resources for space.
Right. True. I think that's and this is where it gets into, like, the societal part of it. Like, I think, how is our economics going to change? Our whole, like, economic philosophy going to change with space? Because we think of everything in terms of profit on Earth. Like, it doesn't mean anything unless it goes in somebody's pocket here so that they can spend their money here. But what happens when that thing is, like, half, you know, out there in the universe? Like, how do you define, like, how do you value something that you never physically see with your eyes? That you, like, even, like, you know, this is a weird example, maybe not a weird example, but, like, if you're the CEO of a mining company, you can go visit your mines. You can see that there's a direct line, you know, chain of that rock in the ground that goes to some car somewhere, right? But if you're building stuff out in the universe, especially if humans aren't out there as much, how do you define the value there?
Sure.
Like, what are you doing, right? And so I think that there's an interesting evolution that we're going to have to make in our sense of value that will either be driven by technology and what we're able to do, or will be driven by our social, and probably both, really. It's kind of a give and take, but, like, our social evolution as a species.
I feel like whenever I talk to a lot of people, the value of space exploration, discovering these things, either gets one of two values, either zero or infinite.
Yeah.
There's, like, seems to be a large number of people that fall into the category of don't make sense to do at all, never will, forget it. And then there's another group of people like, yeah, it makes sense to do regardless of the cost. You know, we should push forward.
Yeah.
I was just wondering, you know, have you found some people and some rationale that's in between those two?
In between, so I definitely personally fall more on the infinite side. I think it's just fundamentally we're, you know, as Carl Sagan says, like, star stuff, observing star stuff. Like, let's go observe more star stuff. Let's study and learn everything we can about this universe while we exist here. So I read I haven't been able to finish all of it, but A City on Mars.
Okay.
That new by Zach and Kelly Wienersmith.
Okay, I haven't read it.
So Zach Wienersmith writes a comic strip called Saturday Morning Breakfast Cereal, and they have his wife Kelly Wienersmith is a scientist. I think she's a biologist by trade, but they collaborate. They're both nerds, like nerds, and they've collaborated on a couple books. And this one is about spaceflight and like human exploration, and it's like essentially the city on Mars is like sort of the premise of the book. Like, what would it take, actually, really, if we drill down into it, to build a city on Mars from where we are today? And honestly, it's kind of pessimistic in a lot of ways, because it points out that like space sucks, like Mars sucks, like you don't want to live there. It's miserable, like it's a desolate, airless, hot, cold, like
cold,
there's
not hot.
Well, yeah, cold.
There's
yeah,
like
well,
no hot part of Mars.
That's fair. Okay. But getting there, in the
Minneapolis
vacuum,
looked like a heat wave
right?
in the winter.
Yeah, right. But even getting you're in the vacuum, you got 400 degree difference between light and shadow. The whole prospect of going into space is a brutal endeavor in like a corporeal way, right? It's just like it messes you up, and we're learning that. We learn that with the way that how much work we have to put into keeping astronauts healthy, right? And so it's an interesting take on it because it kind of depressed me a little bit because they were right about a lot of this stuff. That it's like we're not really mentally prepared, I think, to face some of the challenges that we will have to face, if we really want to do that.
Those challenges,
but I think
those challenges will be transformational for humanity.
Yes, I agree, absolutely. So, I'm an optimist, and I fall in the I think it's infinitely valuable, but I'm kind of a realist when it comes to how much work it's going to take to do that. And so, you say 200 years, like I don't know if we'll have a city on Mars in 200 years. We might have an outpost on Mars. Maybe, probably, but
consider where we were 200 years ago. 0 airline passengers.
That's
we
true.
had no electric lighting.
Yeah.
We had, computers were, I think, mechanical at best.
200 years?
Yeah, I'm
Did
not
we
even
even
sure
have-
mechanical.
I think they were theoretical.
Theoretical.
Maybe there was some mechanical. I guess, Ada Lovelace was what, like 715? I can't remember. Terrible at dates.
Yeah.
I have basically a history major, but I'm terrible at dates.
Yeah, what do you remember of like 1824? It's just
Right.
there was something
There were some steam engines,
important to the people at the time.
Right.
Not sure what it was, but
Well, yeah. So, I mean, you're alluding to like the exponential growth thing?
I think exponential is dangerous because it seems to come in spurts, and to a large degree, those spurts seem to be unpredictable.
Yes.
And we might have a city on Mars in the next couple of decades, or we may not have a city on Mars in the next 500 years.
Yeah.
It could go both ways. And the thing that could drive us to have a city on Mars in the next 2 decades could be something really bad. Like nuclear war on Earth. People are like, you know what? I can handle the cold. I can handle the cold. I can't handle the insanity of the other 7 billion people on this planet, but I can handle the cold. That might be the thing that drives a certain set of people to go to Mars in a couple of decades.
It's interesting you say that because that was one of the first parts of this book, and I can loan it to you if you'd like.
Oh yeah, I love it.
It's great, really well written and very well researched. Like they did not skimp on their research. Like they talked to like everybody in their field, like experts in their fields. But one of the things he says early on is like abandoning Earth, even in the event of like a nuclear apocalypse, if there's 100,000 people left on Earth, abandoning Earth to go to Mars would be like moving into a waste dump because your AC broke.
Exactly.
Like
it's true.
It just it doesn't make any sense. Like it's so much worse over there than it could ever be here. Like you have free air.
Yeah.
Here we are evolved to live here. Like you can eat stuff off the plants here, like the animals and stuff. Like there's nothing there, literally nothing. And so, that thing of like, oh well, we're trying to, global warming is going to destroy the Earth. It's like it's still going to be better here than it would be on Mars.
Absolutely.
For millennia.
Yeah,
You know,
I mean,
if we're
yeah.
able to terraform Mars, sure, you're talking a million years, or at best maybe 500,000, right? But like, I don't know. Yeah.
No, totally. I mean, people are like, hey, we're going to mess with this planet. Of course, we need to develop Mars. I'm like, I really don't understand too much about the environment there versus the environment here because, I don't think the math works out.
No, it's true. I do think, and this is maybe a quip, I don't know where I heard it or if I sort of just pull it out of thin air. And honestly, I'm not even sure it's true, but I kind of believe it, which is that if we can figure out how to live sustainably on Mars, we can figure out how to do it here too.
Absolutely.
Like that technology transfers. Yeah. Like the in the short term being 1,000 years, living sustainably on Mars means if building 100% or near 100% recyclable, like contained habitats where you reuse everything and you don't need any inputs, right? Like a sustainable habitat on Mars means no inputs from Earth, means it's sustainable. It might be fragile, it might be,
Zero fault
tolerant or one fault tolerant, but to design that, you need to design systems that are very, very highly recyclable, like in the 99.9 percentile range, right? And those same technologies will help us here. Full stop.
Absolutely.
Like there's no ifs, ands, or buts about that, in my opinion.
And then figuring out, one key piece of that is not only like the whole biology part, which nature's already figured out about how to take carbon dioxide, turn to oxygen and produce like food, and that gets eaten, the pieces get broken down, all that. But also like our material economy, being able to have some substance that is infinitely recyclable, that you're able to take things you don't need or are broken, put them into a device, and turn into things you do need.
Right.
I think that technology, will transform.
Yes.
Like the world.
Yeah, absolutely.
People, whenever they see material made out of this, substance made out of this, they won't just pass it off or throw it away. They'll be like, oh my gosh, I could turn that into.
Yeah, right, exactly.
It's kind of like,
you
see people fighting over the garbage. I found that first. It'd be like the hillbillies of Beverly Hills or something.
Totally. Yeah. No, and I mean, so there's a book, Neil Stephenson, The Diamond Age. Okay. Where the premise is basically that we figured out a way to it's basically 3D printers at the atomic level, right? So everybody has an internet feed to their house, but they also have, I forget what it's called, but it's basically a feed of atoms, of different types of atoms, and they have a fabricator in their house that can fabricate anything. You need a mattress, you push a button and it makes you a new mattress. You need a new whatever, it makes you a new whatever. But we still have the haves and the have-nots in this world. And it's like, I think, call me a hippie, but like until we figure out a way to like bring everybody up at the same time, like there's always going to be like a difference, like a range of wealth and poverty of some sort. Yeah. But until we can figure out how to shrink that range, it's going to be really hard for us to survive effectively anywhere else. Like it's not going to, the rich and powerful can only go so far before, if they're just stepping on everybody else along the way. And we as a society will tend to topple over if it's too tall, if we build too tall. And so it's, I don't know. I think that's when it comes down to that like change in economic mindset of like, what do we value? Why do we value that? And how do we apply that theory of value to the things that we want to do that we think are valuable, like exploring the stars? How do we derive value from that? So anyway.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. There's like so many like arbitrary games created around the world that create so much enthusiasm in people. How can you create that same enthusiasm, like figuring out the natural world and designing stuff? And it's just like if the society could value anything,
True.
And it's just like, how do you create a situation where it starts valuing that?
Yeah. It's true.
If you could, would you take a trip to space?
Yeah.
Oh, really?
It's on my bucket list. Yeah.
Okay.
I don't need to go far. I just want to see the world from orbit before I die. You know. But yeah, absolutely.
Do you think you'll get a chance in your lifetime?
I think I have a good chance. I think right now I'd probably give myself 30-70, 30 yes, 70 no.
Okay.
Which is way better than it used to be.
Absolutely. I mean, like 200 years ago, it was 0-100.
Right. True. Yeah. Pre-Wright brothers, it was not even the prospect. But you know, I don't know that I'll ever. I think it's unlikely. You know, from just a pure statistical perspective, I'd ever become like a NASA astronaut. But what's cool about what's happening is like there's all these private companies that are starting to explore and put people in space for reasons, for commercial reasons or otherwise, right? And so, especially as the cost of spaceflight goes down, you know, like I can imagine a world in which certain people might be cross-trained, like, hey, you're designing something that needs to operate in space, and someone needs to operate it in space. So you need the perspective of someone who's been to space. So we're going to send you to space for a week, so you get that perspective before you go have to design this thing or work on this project or whatever. And then we might get to the point where you got to fly to New York to go meet with go see the factory. It's like, well, you got to go up into orbit to see the factory. It's a similar sort of thing. But it makes sense for companies to start spending money on those types of things and sending people to get those experiences. So I'm hopeful that will be a more broad thing. And in addition to the commercial tourism, I guess, spaceflight. I don't think, to me, tourism isn't a very reliable economic prospect for space per se.
Depends on the price.
Well, yeah.
The price and volume, right?
Of course,
yeah.
That's true.
Yeah.
And safety. I mean,
oh yeah. Right now we're sending the fit of the fit. What happens when you start sending people who sit at their desk all week long and have high blood pressure and diabetes and all the
a lot of good
stuff.
science could come from that.
Yeah. Maybe very costly science.
Right. There's that. Definitely. There's also just the vehicle safety. Basically every vehicle that flies today would if it was an airplane, it would be considered an experimental vehicle. Airplanes don't come out of the factory and put civilians in them until they've had tens of thousands of hours of test flights. And we just don't do that with spacecraft because we can't really right now. And so the spacecraft that are flying are safe, they're reliable, but they're reliable in the context of spaceflight.
Sure.
Which is...
It's relative.
Yeah, it's relative, yeah. Exactly. And so...
It's like, an army helmet,
Yeah, exactly. It'll stop a bullet, but why did you need to stop a bullet in the first place, right? And if that bullet was 3 inches further down, it's a different context, it's a different thing, and I think most people who would think about going to space as a space tourist think of it as a theme park ride, and not as something that genuinely has mortal peril involved. You could die.
Exactly.
It's not like a whee, but anyway.
And yet, fatal traffic accidents every day. We still get in our cars. It's all about the numbers.
That's true.
Playing the odds.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's a good point. It's a very good point.
Well, that's pretty much all the questions I had for you.
Okay.
Is there anything else? I just thought it'd be good for people looking at this video 200 years from now, from their
200 years
from their moon bases and Mars bases, trying to see what this decade was like.
Yeah. Well, hi, great grandson, I guess, or something. Yeah, I don't know. If I hope it goes well. Whatever happens, I hope it goes well.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.